November meeting of the Springfield Board of Mayor and Aldermen is called to order. Please stand and we'll have the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I want to welcome everybody tonight. Our first agenda item is 1.2, the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen held on October 15, 2019. Is there any corrections? Oh, we're doing that here? No. Okay. Alderman Harris made the motion and it was seconded by Alderman Head. Any corrections? All those in favor? Can you vote? No, you can't vote here. Okay. All those opposed? 1.3 is our public hearing. Our first public hearing is Ordinance 19-23, an ordinance amending the City of Springfield's Conditions of Service Manual by amending the section entitled Gas by amending certain policies. If there's anyone that would like to speak for this public hearing, please come to the mic. Please state your name and you have 2 minutes to speak. No one like to speak? Public hearing is closed. Our second public hearing is Ordinance 19-24, an ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020's annual budget by amending certain general fund operating budgets. If you would like to speak, please come to the microphone. No one would like to speak? Public hearing is closed. Our third public hearing of the night is Ordinance 19-25, an ordinance abandoning the right-of-way between Hill Street and Matthews Street. Please come to the mic if you would like to speak. Public hearing is closed. 2.1. Discuss and possible take action on Ordinance 19-20 on a third and final reading. An ordinance abandoning the right-of-way between Jones Street and Davis Street. Do I hear a motion to discuss? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Head. Discussion, gentlemen. No questions? You're ready to vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Record the votes, please.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.2, discuss and possible take action on Ordinance 19-21 on a third and final reading. An ordinance adding 9 parcels located in the 9th Civil District to the Springfield Historic District overlay. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris and seconded by Alderman Head. Questions, gentlemen? Comments? No questions? We're ready for the vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
2.3, discuss and possible take action on Ordinance 19-22 on a third and final reading. An ordinance to rescind the current personnel policies and procedures manual and adopt a new personnel policy manual. Do we have a motion and a second to discuss? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Vice Mayor Harris. Questions? Okay. No questions? We're ready to vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
2.4, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 19-23 on a second reading. An ordinance amending the City of Springfield Conditions of Service Manual by amending the section entitled Gas by amending certain policies to read as set forth in Exhibit A. Do we have a motion and a second? Motion made by Alderman Head. Do we have a second? Second, Vice Mayor Harris. Questions, gentlemen? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.5, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 19-24 on a second reading. An ordinance amending the fiscal year 2020 annual budget by amending certain general fund operating budgets. Do I have a motion and a second? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Ms. Holt, our city manager, would like to start.
We would appreciate it if you all would approve an amendment to this budget ordinance to allow for extra expenditures for reappraisal cost. We will be paying annually for 5 years, and so we're adding $4,650 to the budget.
Say the amount again.
$4,650 from what was previously. And it's included in your amended Exhibit A.
So we need to amend it?
Yes, need to amend it first to include that.
Amend it to what it needs to be,
$4,650.
$4,650 added to the budget?
Yes.
That's my motion.
A motion to amend was made by Vice Mayor Harris and seconded by Alderman Trotter. Discussion. No discussion? Oh, we're going to let her catch up. She's got to type it in, so hold on just a second.
It's okay.
Sorry.
You can go.
Okay, we're ready for the vote for the amendment. Okay. Anyone like to change their vote? Record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay. Back on the main motion as amended. Are there questions? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.6, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 19-25 on a second reading. An ordinance abandoning the right-of-way between Hill Street and Matthews Street. Do we hear a motion in a second? Do we have a second? Motion made by Alderman Gregg, seconded by Alderman Head. I'm sorry. Any questions? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.7, Discuss and possible take action on ordinance 19-26 on a first reading. An ordinance establishing the new rates and fees for services at the center. Do we have a motion on your iPad and a second? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Discussion, gentlemen. Oh, that's right, I'm sorry. I'm glad she's over here because she keeps me on task. This is a first reading, so we have to read the ordinance. Ms. Briggles.
Ordinance 1926, an ordinance establishing new rates and fees for services provided at the center as set forth in Exhibit A attached. Whereas the cost to provide utilities and to maintain equipment at the center have continued to increase over the years, and whereas user fees must be increased to help pay for the increased cost to operate the center, and whereas Article 4, Section 13 of the Charter of the City of Springfield, Tennessee requires legislative action to amend or set fees. Now, therefore, be it ordained by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen of Springfield, Tennessee as follows. The rates and fees for certain services provided at the center are hereby amended as set forth in Exhibit A attached. All ordinances, resolutions, and policies in conflict herewith are hereby rescinded to the extent of the conflict only.
Thank you. Now we're ready for discussion. And of course, you saw in the notes, in the memo, this was passed by their board, their advisory board. Correct, Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Martin?
Mr. Martin, will you come to the podium, please? Alderman Harris.
Just generally, Terry, can you explain what's changing that much?
It's just the rental fees. It doesn't affect our seniors, any of the fees that we have for our members that come in on a daily fee or anything like that. It's just the rental fees. It's a $100 deposit. We've ran into a couple situations where we've had some folks that not pay. One individual filed bankruptcy after the event, and then we've had some damage in the building. The $100 deposit goes towards damage. If not, it goes back to the bill if there's no damage. And we've had some damage that has exceeded the $100. So we've changed the deposit to be $500 for the weekend events. And then we've also changed, we separated the fee. For some reason, it was separated for round tables and rectangle tables. They're used the same amount, so we bumped those up and made them an equal $5 for the tables. And we also raised the fee for the chairs and the parachute. We've contacted Goodlettsville, Gallatin, Portland. Everybody's got a rec center or does rentals, and we compared our prices with them, so we're right there where we need to be.
But nothing's changing as far as those that walk and
No,
that type?
no. Everything's right where that needs to be also.
Okay. Other questions while he's at the mic? Thank you, Mr. Martin. Any other discussion? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.8, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 19-27 on a first reading. Ordinance rezoning one parcel located in the 9th Civil District on South Main Street from R20 Low Density Residential District to RS10 Medium Density Residential Single Family District. Do we have a motion to discuss? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Ms. Brickles, will you please read?
Ordinance 19-17, an ordinance rezoning one parcel located in the 9th Civil District on South Main Street from R20 Low Density Residential District to RS10 Medium Density Residential Single Family District. Whereas an application for rezoning was presented to the Springfield Planning Commission by John T. Johnston, owner, and Clay Jones, owner's authorized agent, requesting one parcel approximately 11.88 acres located on South Main Street be rezoned from R20 Low Density Residential District to RS10 Medium Density Residential District, Single Family District. Whereas the Springfield Planning Commission has reviewed the request and voted 2 yes and 6 no not to recommend this parcel to be rezoned. Now therefore be it ordained by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen of Springfield, Tennessee as follows. One parcel totaling approximately 11.88 acres owned by John T. Johnston located on South Main Street, tax map 91, parcel 88, and more fully described by Exhibit A attached, is hereby rezoned from R20 Low Density Residential District to RS10 Medium Density Residential Single Family District. This zoning shall become effective following its third and final passage as required by law.
Thank you. Discussion, gentlemen. Mr. Trotter.
It's my understanding that the zoning commission voted against this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I've had several calls, it's my ward, that people in that area, the people I represent, are against it. So therefore, I will be voting against it also.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mayor, I spent a considerable amount of time today looking at the history of the number of times this piece of property's been here. You know, I recorded all the meetings, and so I've listened to the planning meetings, the public hearings. I've reheard the neighbors when they came to speak to the issue. All the prior times it was because of the zoning change like it is now could have allowed duplexes. This is the first time it's come before the board that would not allow duplexes. It's called a couple of real estate agents. And the price of the lots after what they have to do to this is going to be cost prohibitive, in my opinion, for any rental property. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of about 600 tons of asphalt, nearly 1,000 tons of gravel just for the base of the road. I think that was the figure, if I can remember right, but it was a considerable amount of money. And with it not being, the discussions in the past, most of the emphasis was against duplexes.
Which it is zoned for duplexes now.
Right. But if you were to build on there now, you would only get about eight buildings. You could only put 8, if you got creative, maybe 9 structures on that property as it's zoned right now. And if it was asked before to do R15, which would have allowed about 37 structures. Of course, if you were to make those duplexes, it would have reduced it. Notwithstanding, knowing what's in the area, I've also pulled the tax maps of everybody who's next to that piece of property. And the tax address for where the tax card are sent, there's only one person that lives next to it. There's another person who looks like next door. So maybe they got 2 properties, one's a rental, I'm not sure, but it's sent to the address next, and then all of the rest of the property to the side and front and behind it or somewhere else. There's a lot of other homes in that area, so it looks to me like you couldn't build this. They're looking for non-duplex properties, structures.
Single family.
And with the price of what it's going to take to build the road and the utilities, it's just not plausible that these are going to be rentals. These are going to be homeowners. And so that's changed. And having looked at the history all through all of the meetings, it was always no duplexes, no duplexes, duplexes. They can duplex now, but they can only get 8 structures on it.
Right.
But
Okay.
they still have to build the same road. So if y'all didn't look at that and look at the old meetings and look at the old records, that's some history from my perspective.
Okay. Yes, sir, Mr. Gregg. I think you serve on that board.
Sitting in on that meeting, the neighbors
in that area are calling what Mr. Jones is wanting to build a minimum of 1,350 square foot house at a price of about $200,000. They're viewing it as a starter home. I don't see that being a starter home. He's looking at putting 30 homes, single-family homes, in that area, which would equate to about $6 million. And I see it as a positive for the city of Springfield. And the only thing that they brought up that I will agree with is going to add a little bit more traffic, possibly 60 cars.
Traffic will be an issue.
But other than that, this man's talking about building some nice homes.
Well, and I feel, of course, if we need more structures, we need more businesses, we need more homes to sell the water to that we're going to have on January the 1st. Other comments?
I have some questions for Mr. Brewer.
Mr. Brewer, will you please come to the mic?
So, David, and what Alderman Sneed has said and the others have mentioned, the way it is currently zoned, there could be duplexes put on this piece of property.
That is correct.
And there would be, if the owner of the property decided tomorrow that he wanted to put duplexes on it, then the city would have to abide by that, by the way it's currently zoned. Is that correct, or?
Well, more or less, yes. He would have to break it down into lots. In the R20, you have to have 40,000 square foot lot to do a duplex, and the frontage has to be 112 and a half feet. So he could probably pull off 9 lots, maybe 10, and do 10 buildings or 20 dwelling units.
Okay, so 18 to 20 dwelling units.
Correct.
If it were duplexes. Okay.
As zoned.
And then in requesting that it come down to the RS10, that would allow him to put 30 homes on this property. Is that?
As it's designed, yes. Our subdivision regulations only allow 30 lots on a cul-de-sac. In this particular case, the proposed cul-de-sac is approximately 986 feet long, and so he can only put 30 homes in there. In a perfect world, he could put more if he could get 2 entrances, but he can only get the 1, so he's limited to 30 lots in an RS10 classification.
If it were changed down to the RS10, is there any truth to the matter that if he decided to put modular homes on those pieces of property, that could be done under the RS10?
You can put a modular home, a pre-built home that has a green tag as produced and manufactured to codes on any lot in the city of Springfield.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
So if we did 30 homes at 170, that would be a little over $5 million. If it was at 200,000, we did 30, that's going to be what?
About $6 million.
About $6 million investment for the city. Any other questions, gentlemen?
Can staff state their position? Do you have a position, Gina?
Mr. Brooks?
Do you have any thoughts?
Well,
And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I just need to know what.
no, just
you've been to the
looking
meetings.
at it, it seems like single family is a better thing, and the $200,000 price point it's all an improvement, it seems like, from what has been previously submitted. So I would agree with that. And I think that price point and that size house is probably a good thing.
Okay. Other questions? Mr. Harris, were you finished?
I mean, I'm sure if we pass this, we're going to get some on public hearing and all, but it comes a point that we're going to have to do something. I mean, my main concern out there would be the infrastructure of the road, but beginning in January, we've got more water coming. We're talking about building a fire hall out in that vicinity somewhere, and I guess just in my mind, I'm thinking that the single-family dwellings would be a better option than the chance that duplexes are going to turn into rental property from that. But
And I'm not sure the city attorney would be able to answer. I don't know, is there anything that as far as the number of times that a piece of property that comes forward for rezoning, how many times can you turn it down? Do you have to have valid reasons? At what point do you do that?
Speaking in general terms, I believe our zoning regs are written so as a property is only eligible for a rezoning request one time per calendar year. In this situation, I do have some concerns as we continue to deny rezoning of this property or any property that's been before this board and the Planning Commission on more than one time as arbitrary and capricious. That is the standard for denial, and if a landowner felt that their denial was arbitrary and capricious, then they could certainly file suit to have that zoning changed.
Okay. When was this property presented to us before? I'm like Alderman.
It was purchased in 2007 for $200,000.
It's been presented since I've been here in 16, so it's been in the last
couple of years.
Do you remember?
It was in 2017, I believe.
2017.
And at that time, it was proposed at R15. And, of course, the community focused on the fact that duplexes, and they didn't want duplexes. And so in response to that, the Planning Commission and this board made a new zoning classification, RS15, which would be a single-family residential on a 15,000 square foot lot. There were many people that showed up at the Planning Commission, 40 to 50, that are not in favor of this. I think that needs to be stated. But we are in an aggressive construction market in and around the Nashville area. Prices are going up, and to be frank, I think we have almost, if not already, seen the last R20 and R40 developments in Springfield because of a developer has to have a higher density to be able to pay for the infrastructure costs to make it. And if we continue to insist on larger lots and lighter density, we may very well prohibit development in Springfield.
Would the R15 difference in that and the RS10 just be the size of the lots?
The size of the lots, the number of the lots available. Talked to several individuals that said 2 years ago the R15 would go. They say now R15 will not go. R10 is the only number that will go or less. So, our only other zoning classification under an RS10 or an R10 is R7. And I don't know that we really want to go that dense anywhere. But, we have a large portion of our city zoned R7 now.
Other questions? Mr. Trotter?
I understand the majority of the people there, they were at the zoning commission, the meeting. People live in that area?
They live in that area. I don't know how many of them live close to this property and how many of them are in your ward altogether.
Opposed to it, am I correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, well, these are people I represent, so like I said,
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't be much of an alderman, I don't think, if I didn't vote with the people that I represent, so.
Okay. Other discussion? Before we call for a vote. Ready for a vote?
So in the voting, by voting aye, we are approving it, or not?
If we vote aye, we're moving it to a second reading, which will be the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 5-1.
Thank you. 2.9, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 19-24, a resolution authorizing the City of Springfield Gas Department to participate in a public entity partners property conservation matching grant program. Do we hear a motion and a second? Motion made by Alderman Head, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Discussion, questions? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
2.10, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 19-25, a resolution amending the TCRS eligibility period by eliminating the 6-month probation period. Do I have a motion and a second? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Head. Questions?
What exactly does this mean?
Okay, the way it's been forever, any new hire is on probation for retirement for 6 months, which means that their membership in the retirement system does not start until 6 months after they've started employment. So they're not getting retirement credit. This would take away that probationary period for retirement purposes only. So starting the first day of employment, they would be eligible, they would not be vested, but they would be participating in the, or getting eligibility for vesting. So this would be for all new hires after this passes. Now, it came from TCRS, and they said that most of the municipalities are going away from that anyway. And the ones that are in a probationary period now, and there aren't that many, but any employee, plus those that are in the probationary period now, can go back and get credit for that 6 months anyway. So it's a wash, but why not just do away with the probationary period to begin with? Because it does create some confusion later, and then employees have to go back and apply for that 6 months of credit when they're ready to retire. So it just makes it all clean. Everything starts the first day of employment.
So what happens if they are hired in and then they quit in 3 months?
The same thing that would happen if they quit in 4 years. They leave and they're not vested. If they quit in 10 years, they're vested and they don't lose anything. So it really doesn't affect any of that.
So if you got 9 years and 6 months, that would basically just give you 10 years.
Right. If they had actually worked the 10 years.
Right.
Where otherwise, if this weren't in effect, it would be 9 years and 6 months.
Yes,
Yeah.
Most businesses have gotten rid of it.
Any cost to the city?
Well, we would start making retirement contributions from day one instead of waiting 6 months. But then again, one way to look at it is we're just funding. Since it's a defined benefit plan, the money's not really tied specifically to an individual. So we're non-contributory. So it's funding the plan is all it's doing.
And we're not hiring that many people. I mean, it's not gonna be a significant amount of money because we don't hire a lot of people.
No, we're trying, but that's later on the agenda.
Okay. Other questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.11, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 19-26, a resolution declaring the intent of the City of Springfield to reimburse itself for certain expenditures related to the public works projects with the proceeds of a tax-exempt debt obligation to be issued by the City of Springfield, Tennessee, in an approximate amount of $11,250,000. Do we have a motion and a second? Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Questions, gentlemen?
Does this actually move forward the funding of the debt?
No. Now, we do this every year, and it's just so that we can reimburse ourselves if we have expenditures before we issue any debt. And it doesn't mean that we're going to borrow $11.2 million. It's just what we have in the budget. And if we have any expenses prior to issuing any debt, we would just reimburse ourselves. And we do this every year.
Bookkeeping.
Yeah, but this is not committing us to borrowing $11 million, please.
No. Any other questions? Thank you for clarifying that. No other questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.12, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 19-27, a resolution authorizing the distribution of longevity pay to all full-time employees of the City of Springfield. Do we have a motion and a second? Motion made by Alderman Head, seconded by Alderman Trotter. Questions? We do this every year at the same time. No questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 2.12, discuss and possible, oh, I've already done that one. Moving right along. 2.13, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 19-28, a resolution declaring certain properties surplus and authorizing the disposal of such properties. Do we have a motion and a second? Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, seconded by Alderman Head. Any questions? Another bookkeeping matter for every month. No questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 3.1, discuss and possible take action on the adjustment of the retail electric rates of the Springfield Electric Department due to a wholesale fuel cost adjustment by the Tennessee Valley Authority. Do we hear a motion and a second? Do we have a second? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Head. Mr. Gardner.
Mayor, we're increasing 2.3% this month.
Okay. Any questions?
So it was 5% last month, 2% this month. That 5% they're giving us back, like I told you, it's a shell game.
No, it wasn't 5%.
Wasn't 5% last month? It's getting there. It's coming.
Time of the year. Any questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
3.2, discuss and possible take action on the adjustment of the monthly gas rates for the Springfield Gas Department. We need a motion and a second. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Mr. Riddle.
Purchase gas adjustments up 4.9% this month.
Whoa, that's high. Phew.
Like you said, it's time of the year.
It is the time of the year. They know we're going to use it. Any discussion? Ready for a vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay. 3.3, update from the retail coach. There's no action required here. I'm going to ask Austin Farmer with retail coach to come forward. Are you going to put the screen down?
I think we're actually
yes,
going
you.
to project that up here. Hi, Mayor and Board. Thank you for having me. My name's Austin Farmer, Project Director from the Retail Coach. I was last here back in March, and just wanted to give you an update on where we're at in our process, going on in 8 months out of our first initial year, and just wanted to highlight some of the work that we've done, talk about what we're doing right now in terms of retail recruitment, how we're actively recruiting, and then what to expect over the next 100 or so days that are left in our initial year contract. I think they've got this up. So as I mentioned, we started our work back in March. So we kicked off our project on March 4th of this year and have been able to go through the first 7 phases of our retail recruitment process. And so throughout that 7-phase process, we were able to come in and do our analysis on the community. We looked at their primary and secondary retail trade areas, so where people were coming from to come shop in the community, and more importantly, where people are leaving to go and shop and dine other places. We came in and looked at workplace population, how many people are coming into the community, and put all that data together to ultimately come up with a retail profile for the community. And since we've done that, we came up with a list of about 30 different retailers and restaurants that we think fit the community. And since May of this year, have actually been actively recruiting those retailers along with developers to the community. And so since we've started that retail recruitment process, we've actually actively reached out to not only those 30 or 35 retailers and restaurants, but we've actually gone to events on behalf of the city. So we've actually been to about 3 or 4 different International Council of Shopping Center events where we've represented the city. We've set up meetings with brokers, retailers, site selectors, and have been actively recruiting on the city's behalf. And so we're still in that process. We're still out there recruiting. One of the questions that we often get is, have we gotten anything yet? We have had one soft letter of intent from one of the retailers that was on our list. We don't like to publicly talk about those, and Ms. Holt can pass some of that information on. She's got a dashboard with the actual feedback from the retailers that we've been talking to throughout this process. But just wanted to come in and kind of highlight that process for you and answer any questions that you have as we're out there talking to retailers and developers and continuing that process. So I'll open it there if anyone has any questions or any specifics they'd like to get into.
Okay, questions, gentlemen?
So you're saying out of 30 to 35 that you sent out, you had one response?
Not one response. That's one retailer that has put in what's called a letter of intent, an LOI. And so from that response, that 35, we've heard back from 90+% of those 35 retailers. And the responses that we've gotten have actually been very good. So typically with a community your size, when we go out and we send that first batch of recruitment emails and phone calls, we typically get back an initial wave of, no, we're not interested. And for Springfield, we actually haven't had that. We didn't have that big wave of no's. We've had a couple of different retailers say, hey, the market's not quite there yet. It's not the right time, but it looks like an interesting market. It looks like something that could fit 18 to 24 months down the road. We've also had a really strong number of retailers that have replied and said, hey, we like the market, we want to be there, but we don't have a franchisee for the area. And so what we're doing right now is working with them at a corporate level and then working with business owners and entrepreneurs in the area, in the greater Nashville area, to try to pair them with those corporate retailers and restaurants to essentially bring the franchisee to the table. And so we've had a really good, strong response rate, that 90+%. And I would say of that, almost half of those, there's some interest there. So a good mix.
Okay. So what you're saying, the people that said 18 to 24 months, they want us to grow, have more rooftops,
right,
more businesses.
Correct. And a couple of those are restaurants that are very dependent on daytime population. So they're looking at daytime population. You already have a strong daytime population for the community size, but they need to see certain numbers to say, hey, we're going to support lunch and dinner. One of the restaurants we talked to is also a national chain that everyone would be familiar with. They just needed more traffic. And so they said, hey, our growth strategy from Nashville is that we're going to go up and down the freeways first, and then we'll fill in after that. And so they kind of have a map of how they're going to do that, and it's all driven on cars per day. And so you don't quite hit the threshold yet for the cars per day.
So if we could get some more of those people off the road going to Nashville and back here working,
yep, that
would be key.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think there was a conversation earlier about mid-density versus low-density housing. I mean, the more high-quality mid-density and things like that you could build in to help boost that population, those kinds of things help as well.
Okay. Questions, gentlemen? Mr. Smith?
Janet Troman-Marr with some information about where we are with this. I know I'd be interested in knowing. Okay. And also I know that how the contract is set up. They charge for their trips out of town. Isn't it so much a set fee and then so much for the away trips that he just described.
There are some reimbursables, but not for trips like going to the conferences, no.
No,
It's just
yeah.
a flat fee, and then some, we haven't been charged any reimbursables yet.
Yeah, we have the contract was a flat fee plus a not to exceed expenses.
You might also mention, in addition to the franchisees being an issue, the land.
Yeah, good point. So the mix of retailers, and again, Ms. Holt can pass some of this detailed information on to you. We try not to publicly announce a lot of things because it's a competitive disadvantage for you if other communities that you're competing with know who we're targeting. So Ms. Holt has that information. But essentially what we've heard back from some of the larger retailers, a lot of big box retail is shrinking, right? And so they're not doing as big developments, and they're not really looking at traditional formats like they used to, but they still require a lot of space. And so one of the issues that we're having with some of these larger retailers is trying to find the right space for them. So there's not a lot of available space right now for somebody like a Hobby Lobby or someone that might take up more space, a Best Buy type retailer, some of those larger ones. And so we're trying to do what we can with available space, but also look at, hey, what's available for developers, or how could we take some existing space or ground and have a developer come in and lead that way? Because, you know, there's some that there's just not space for them right now that makes sense, that would be feasible. And that's typical. That's typical in a lot of markets. That's not something that's unique or that's a new challenge we haven't seen before. That's why we do the developer recruitment as well.
Other questions, comments? Thank you for bringing an update tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's
Appreciate it.
exciting.
Thanks.
We're ready for 3.4. Discuss and possible take action to approve the offers on the surplus properties acquired via the delinquent tax sales. We need a motion and a second. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, seconded by Alderman Trotter. Questions? You have questions for Ms. Holt?
2 parcels on Roy Pit. Are they small parcels, or what is that?
I asked the same thing. Mr. Martin knows specifically. They're apparently very, very long and very skinny, and they border the property of the offeror, and you can't build on them.
It's got a bunch of logs on it.
Does it?
Yeah. He's gonna pay for this in one cut.
Okay.
She covered it. That's exactly right. They're long, narrow parcels. There are some wide spots maybe in the middle, but Mr. Russell just bought the 140 acres over there on Roy Pit, and these are near his property, and so I guess he was interested. I don't know what, on the intended development, you can see that he typically offers on some of our properties, and he marked out rental house, so he's not intending to build, because I don't believe that it would, that you can necessarily, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
And haul a truckload of logs out of there.
Any other questions? Comments? Ready for a vote? Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay. 3.5, State Form CT-0253. Report on let me start over. Report on debt obligations, which reports on $4,450,000 general obligation refunding bond series 2019 issued on October the 3rd of 2019. No action is required. These are not delinquent, these are debt obligations. Okay, that's just for information. 3.6, discuss and possible take action to approve CSX crossing application and licensing fee for the Railroad Industrial Drive for fiber installation for a total of $20,100. Do we have a motion and a second to discuss this? Do we have a second? Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Questions, gentlemen, to this subject?
Is this in connection with the Electrolux?
No, this is the electric department's fiber for SCADA and connectivity for the substations.
Okay. Other questions? No other questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 5-0 to 1. Alderman Sneed abstains.
Okay. Do we have to state for the record why he abstains? Alderman Sneed, I think we have to.
Yes,
we
that's
have
right. I work for the railroad.
Thank you. 3.7, discuss and possible take action to approve the CSX crossing application and licensing fee for the railroad at Old Greenbrier Pike for fiber installation of a total of $17,550. Do I hear a motion and a second? A motion made by Alderman Head and seconded by Vice Mayor Harris. Discussion. This is the same, just in a different location.
How many of these are we gonna need?
Just these two.
Just these two.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? We're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record.
Motion passes 5-0 to 1. Alderman Sneed abstains.
3.8, discuss and possible take action on a request from the Electric Department to ratify the emergency purchase for emergency storm restoration assistance from M&M Electrical Contractors in the amount of $14,825.19. Do we have a motion to discuss? And a second. Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Alderman Gregg. Questions? This was an emergency purchase. Got to keep the electric on. No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
3.9, discuss and possible take action to approve the joint cost agreement between the Tennessee Valley Authority and the City of Springfield. We need a motion and a second to discuss. Motion made by Alderman Trotter, seconded by Vice Mayor Harris.
Mayor.
Yes, sir. Mr.
This,
Sneed.
this cost adjustment is because of, if I read through it right, Mr. Gardner, I guess you're going to explain what this is, right?
Yes, and first I want to let you know there is a correction on the amount, on the true-up amount. I think Lisa got a later email than I did. It should be $1,328.73, if you want to make that correction. Yeah, this, Alderman Sneed, is every 5 years. TVA said they're going to do it every 5 years. It's turning between 5 to 8 years. TVA does a review of the shared costs that the electric system shares with the municipality, for those that share costs with the municipality, which we do, to make sure that those funds are being used, the electric funds are being used for electric purposes, and that any services the city provides are those services that will benefit the electric department. So our true-up, our last true-up was in 2012. That was a fairly sizable adjustment, much more than this one. This is very small, and it actually is indebtedness to the city. Last time it was the other way around. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
we met with Erica Jordan at TVA, and she was very pleased with how we have followed how the city has followed the last study since 2012. So I'd say in 7 years we've done really well.
Mayor.
Yes, sir.
This has to do with how many street lights we have, and is that part of the cost? I think that's when they go around and see how many street lights we have, and last time they found more or less than we thought we had.
That is part of shared costs, but that's kind of separate. This is actually costs for billing, operations, shared costs that we have down here at City Hall for billing. Lisa's
Personnel
department.
and rent for the building,
Right.
and equipment and meter reading and
Right.
all of those things that we charge.
Putting those costs within the different utility funds.
Right. So what is the city's electric bill? I mean, it's in front of me right there, but you know it right off the top of your head?
The city, what, city hall?
All of our electricity used at the city, what is the city's electric bill?
I don't know.
Don't know.
Let's say you might want to try and get some solar over there for you.
But I will say, this is the first time that I can remember that it's worked in the favor of the general fund side.
Other questions for Mr. Gardner while he is at the podium? No other questions? Any more discussion, gentlemen? We're ready for a vote. Thank you, Mr. Gardner. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. 3.10, discuss and possible take action to award a contract with a third-party ethics hotline for employees and public to report suspected waste, fraud, sexual, racial, or age discrimination and harassment, and award a 25% of any monetary value of any fraud found via investigation. Do we have a motion and a second to discuss? Motion made by Alderman Sneed, seconded by Alderman Head. Discussion, gentlemen.
I hope I'm not out of order. I'd like to get Ms. Holt's input on this.
Yes, sir.
Well, I don't think you're out of order. I truly don't know. I mean, this was Alderman Sneed's request, and we put it on exactly the way he worded it, and to be honest, I'm not really sure.
Well, it's surprising that you're not sure what we're talking about, Ms. Holt, because I tried previously to do exactly this, and we discussed it in detail, and it was with different aldermen at that time. We've got new people on the board, and we've just gotten,
Are you talking about the NAVEX?
I think that was the name.
Okay, right, okay.
It's an odd name, NAVEX, to do this, and I think the whole premise of some of the, well, we had some executive sessions, so I have to parse my words here about what we're talking about. I think, I'll just put it this way, if we had this in place, we'd be in a better position to mitigate potential lawsuits and losses if employees who felt aggrieved would have a third party and not feel intimidated or claim intimidation to report it through the ranks of their department.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Have we researched this before?
We did. When Mr. Sneed brought this up several years ago, he recommended one that the railroad uses called a NAVEX Global, and I checked into that, and then I got some other pricing, and the others were less expensive, but then they all do different things. This one that he has on the agenda for tonight gets into a whole lot more as far as the harassment and certainly the monetary value of any reported incidents award. That's nothing that's ever really been discussed before in any of these ethics hotlines. And the board just deferred taking any action and said that, well, when it came back during budget or whatever, we would look at it. And then it was never brought up, or it was never.
It was never brought up because I put it on for discussion, and I didn't add all of those details. So since it never got on the floor to discuss, you didn't know what I was trying to do.
Okay. Alderman Trotter has a question.
Do you know of any other surrounding cities or counties that are using this system?
At the time, several years ago, when I researched it, I think there was one over in East Tennessee that I called, and maybe one other one There were a couple.
Okay.
Well, the way that it's been presented, that it's written, I'm assuming that this hotline would be established for an anonymous caller, if they wish to be anonymous?
If they want, they can make it anonymous. It's best if they do leave their name, that they can get a call back. It gives more validity to, if they give their name, it's not, but they can make it anonymous, and it can be investigated that way. But if there's any follow-up questions, it helps to have the name, but they don't have to. I've called our ethics hotline at the railroad before because of some theft, things of that nature. It's there, it should be in place. Other people have used it for harassment issues at the railroad. Most of my calls about theft was because of just a stealing time. It's, as a union official, you play a part in some of the management too, but I think if there's theft of time or theft of property, theft of scrap, I think that has been an issue. I may have said something to y'all, if you can recollect, in the past. I think it will mitigate any future lawsuits is what I'm looking at. I mean, what we've talked about, I just can't get into it, but I think you know where I'm going. The cost of this, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago, it was like $10,000 a year for the number. They base it on the number of employees that we have, is how they base it.
Okay.
Well, part of it, to me, in the way that you've presented in this, that we're reading on our tablets, I mean, I know others that have worked with companies that have had these type of lines, and I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with it. It would be in the reporting aspect of it, though. If you're doing this anonymous and you're upset with somebody over maybe some type of employee problem that there's been, and you don't like what the outcome of it's been, then you can call in anonymously to this line, and then it's going to create a lot of investigation to have to take place. And I would almost think that you would have to have another person just to investigate this, and to somewhat, if the person's calling in anonymous, it's to me, it's kind of like a dog chasing its tail around in a circle. You're not going to get anywhere that's just my opinion. But then also you state in this, to establish 2 contacts for the hotline contractor to relay the complaint, one being any elected alderman of the board of mayor and alderman, and the second being a member of staff. But when you get into racial or age, and some of these things are about HR, then the board of mayor and alderman has nothing to do with the day-to-day operation of the city of Springfield. That falls under the city manager.
That's correct.
So I would think if it was reported to us as if this board appointed the alderman representative for this, the way it's written, we would be out of line on that. Would we not?
Mr. Harris,
We would.
you are the vice mayor, correct?
Yes, sir, I am.
You are by default on the ethics committee, correct?
Okay.
And so, do you want to think of what you just said about it was out of line for any alderman?
Okay, gentlemen.
Not for any alderman,
Mr.
no,
Singh.
sir. What you're proposing here to me reads that you're asking for an alderman to be involved in the day-to-day operations of the city. If there's an employee complaint and it's called into this hotline, then that complaint's going to be relayed to an alderman. We
Okay.
have nothing to do with that on a day-to-day operation.
Mr. Harris.
If it's taken to the city manager and then there's an ethics violation established, then it would come before the ethics committee.
As you can read.
I mean, that's my interpretation.
As you can read into what I did put in here, just that paragraph, if there's just one person, then if you want to shoot down what I'm doing, how would you suggest that we do
I'm
that?
making a statement, Alderman Sneed. You're taking it very personal.
Okay, gentlemen.
You're shooting it down, but you're not giving us an alternative.
I think
Well-
I didn't give you an alternative. I'm just stating my opinion about the way that it's written.
I believe that this is the job of Ms. Holt and Mr. Martin, and they're doing a very good job running the city.
We're in lawsuits, Mayor. I think
We are.
this would have mitigated any potential settlement if any potential affected going forward employee felt aggrieved. They could have a track record of, did you call the ethics hotline? And then how are we going to know that it goes anywhere?
Yes, sir.
We
can't-
weren't apprised of anything until we're in a lawsuit.
We can't get into the day-to-day operations according to our charter. Alderman Trotter had his hand up.
The
and then
vice
Ms. Holt.
mayor's on that's committee by default.
Wouldn't
Yes,
that be a responsibility of the department heads if someone had a complaint or, one of the supervisors knew of one of the employees stealing or something? Shouldn't they take that to the department head and that department head take care of that?
If they're not comfortable going to that department head, I know that Mr. Martin and Ms. Holt's door's open to them. If we get those kind of calls, we are supposed to report those.
Well, Mayor,
I'm obligated to call Ms. Holt or Mr. Martin.
Mayor, four of you people on this board right now, I told you about some theft not too long ago and challenged you to do something about it. Not one of you brought anything to this board. Not one of you. I wasn't going to bring it to the board and have sat here with my chin on, everybody look down at the floor. Now, nobody wanted to do something about it, and here it is. You got an opportunity to have it reported in a different way. And that report of theft was to me. It wasn't to Gina Holt. It wasn't to their department manager. It was to me.
Did you report that to Ms. Holt?
I reported it to 3 other aldermen, and nobody wanted to do anything about it. And it was a long time ago, but I'm tired of y'all trying to always maintain the status quo. We're
Okay.
trying to do something different here.
We don't need a lecture, Mr. Snell.
Yes, you do. There needs to be a breakup of the status quo.
Ms. Holt.
One thing I would like to point out is that the personnel policy that was passed tonight is very, very, very detailed, and you're getting into different things with the ethics and the request, and when you get into discrimination and other things. I mean, waste and fraud's one thing, but when you get into, as has been said, age discrimination, harassment, racial, sexual items, our new policy that's effective now has very, very detailed, all kinds of workplace violence, harassment, discrimination. Every single employee is going to be trained in the next few weeks. And just want to say that if there were a hotline, and I'm not opposed to a hotline, but the thing that's going to happen is when that report is made, who's going to investigate it? It's going to come right back the way it has been, because we're the ones, Mr. Martin, that would probably end up doing it anyway if a third party calls it in, because they can't investigate any type. It has to be internal.
Well, as you can,
And so-
I'm sorry, Ms. Holt, but as you can read, and you are conveniently omitting in what you're describing how this works, there's a number that, there's an account made, not an account, how did I write that? It's a, help me out here, how did I write that? A case number, when somebody reports, and there's a number that they can call in and follow what's being done with it. It's not just somebody can make a call and it's forgotten. They can keep track with it, and if they don't like the results from calling in, finding out what happened, then they can go and tell you about it. But
Mr. Sneed, I worked for a large corporation, and we had this, and we paid for this as a corporation. It was very expensive, and it was nothing but garbage that was called into that line. It turned out to be something where employees called to complain because they had been in trouble.
Right.
And written up for various reasons. It did not work at this large corporation that I was formerly with. And I do not believe we need to spend money, 25%, when Ms. Holt and Mr. Martin are doing that job.
I'd like to ask the city attorney's opinion. Y'all's always getting her opinion. I'd like to see what she thinks, how an ethics hotline could help mitigate any potential settlement.
I don't think that an ethics hotline would mitigate a settlement.
Well, I guess I'd have amnesia about what we talked about in the executive session. I'm sorry.
Okay. Other discussion? Mr. Martin? Our Assistant City Manager, Ryan
Mr. Sneed, I just want to point out to you that state law does require, if any public official is aware of any theft or misconduct, to report that within 5 working days to the comptroller's office. So I want to just, that's from a 2007 law, so it's a good time to remind everyone of that. So if you're aware of something, we're all under an obligation to report it to the comptroller's office. So I hope you did that.
Well, that employee's not working here anymore.
Okay.
But
Any other further discussion? No other further discussion? We'll move on to item 3.11. Are we voting? Is there a motion?
Yeah, there's a motion and a second.
Well, there's a motion and a second. Okay. I'm sorry, we'll go back and vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Record the votes, please.
Motion fails 2-4.
Okay. 3.11. Discuss and possible take action to amend the classifications and the compensation policy. Do we have a motion to discuss in a second? Do we have a second? Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, seconded by Alderman Trotter. Ms. Holt?
Okay, if you read my memo, you understand, and we discussed this briefly at the budget. We have had a difficult time recruiting people, especially with all of that's going on in the Nashville area. And so we did we made some adjustments in our compensation plan, primarily during budget, to retain our current employees, but also to help a little bit with recruiting. We are still having a very, very difficult time getting technical and professional people with certifications and licenses. And it's just, to hire them in at no higher than a step 5, when you have 13 steps in a level, it's almost impossible. And so what we're asking is just to take off the cap on step 5 and say that we were able to do this before we had the current classification and compensation plan. But it would not be used very often, I can tell you that, because most of 90% of our employees come in at step 1. But there are times, and then getting more and more so in this highly competitive market, that we just cannot get people at a step 5. And so we're just asking to remove that cap.
Okay, questions for Ms. Holt? Discussion? This is a problem that everyone faces. Pick up the Wall Street Journal and you can see that everybody in America is struggling with this. Questions? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent doc. Take these individually.
I move to take them all.
Okay. Motion made to take them all. Second. Can you do that? Can we do that from here?
Somebody needs to second it.
He did. Verbally. Come on. Yes? Okay. Any discussion about taking these all together? Ready for a vote? Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I want to point out at your place of residing tonight that you have some documents from the Stokes Brown Library. Now, they're not on the agenda. I just wanted to point out that you received this. Please take this home and look at it. Michelle Adcock is our interim director. She's doing a great job of never missing a beat. Want to point that out to the public and to you, the aldermen. The visits in October to our library was 11,265 people coming through the doors. We are so proud of that library, and I want to thank her for what she's doing, that they've not missed a beat since she has become interim, and thank you so much. I also have one last announcement before I turn it over to our city manager. I want to wish Miss Christy Barty a happy birthday. Thank you for what you do for us. Happy birthday. Ms. Holt.
And if you didn't know, Michelle Adcock is in the back row, along with board chair of the library, Corinne Baldwin. So both of them are here, and we do appreciate this. This is great information to have. Very short and sweet. The Electrolux SIA project for the road that will be Industrial Drive, starting around Delight Products, going behind Holly and coming out on Industrial Drive where the transmission line crosses. The contract was awarded on that, and there was a pre-construction hearing. However, they didn't include any city officials, so there's going to be a second pre-construction hearing that notice or meeting to go over the line relocation. So I just found that out today. So at least that's starting to take progress. The Batson Parkway update is, I informed you all that in August, we received the notice to proceed. So right now it's in the design phase, and I think they're working it pretty aggressively, but the desire is to have everything designed and ready to go to bid probably in the spring or early summer. So we're making progress on it and estimate maybe 1 year, a little over for construction. So probably looking at sometime maybe in 2022. So that's exciting. So it is moving forward. We can't go without mentioning Winter Wonderland. It's already that time of year, so put it on your calendars, December 13 and 14, December 20th and 21st. And of course, it's free admission, 5:30 to 9 o'clock. So make sure you go out there. And then last but certainly not least, this Saturday is Christmas on the Square. And you all should know that the theme for the day is our bicentennial. And the parade is going to be the largest, I think, that they've had, over 30 floats. And it's in celebration of us. So the Board of Mayor and Aldermen you all are the Grand Marshals. So it would be great if you all would be in the parade to ride on the float. So I need to know how many of you can do that this Saturday. The parade's at 2 o'clock. You would need to be there by 1:30. So I'd sort of like to know.
And we'll be in the front.
And we'll be in the front, right. So you all are looking real enthusiastic.
I will be there.
Let's see some enthusiasm here. Remember, this is a nice big parade, and the city's going to have a float. We're going to have our first float, and Mr. Terry Martin and the Parks and Rec Department have been working very hard on that. So it's a big deal. So he won't let us see it yet, but we know it's really good. Okay. But I do need to know who's coming.
I'll be there.
I will not be able to.
That's right. You've got a funeral.
I will not be able to.
Y'all leaving it up to me?
You're what?
I got a job.
That's what.
You got a job?
I know Mr. Sneed's all over it.
Mr. Sneed, you gonna be on the float with us?
I don't know what I'm gonna do in the morning.
I'll let you know.
Okay. Looks like Ms. Holt and I are gonna be on the float.
And Mr. Martin.
And Mr. Martin.
And that's great representation.
And I would like to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and for all the employees out in the audience and anyone that's watching this, and please tell the other employees that are not here tonight, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving, happy travels. Enjoy your family during this time, and have a safe trip back home. And I wish you all the happiness, and God bless everyone. The meeting is adjourned.